Welcome to The Criminologist, the podcast dedicated to educating and entertaining our listeners. This week, bringing you a special American Probation and Parole Association edition. As the voice of the community corrections industry, APPA serves as the field's leading professional membership association. In addition to their U.S. members, the American Probation and Parole Association is supported by international members who are actively involved in strengthening community corrections work in their own countries. APPA's International Relations Committee aims to connect community corrections professionals around the world to inspire and share insights from their unique experiences and best practices. Welcome to this special APPA episode of The Criminologist. And now, welcome your host, Joseph Arvidsson.
Hello and welcome to episode 209 of the Criminologist podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. This time, we are bringing you another special edition episode in conjunction with our good friends at the American Probation and Parole Association. We are once again teaming up with APPA's International Relations Committee to highlight another amazing global perspective, this time all the way from Switzerland. Before we dive into our interview, I want to remind everyone about the upcoming American Probation and Parole Association's Training Institute in Indianapolis, kicking off on June 28th, 2024. This event is a fantastic opportunity for professionals in the field to connect, learn, and share best practices. I am excited to announce that I will be moderating a presentation with Joe Winkler from the Florida Department of Corrections, along with Juliana Carbonaro from the Romanian Probation Inspector's National Probation Directorate. That session will be entitled Transatlantic Collaboration, sharing best practices between the United States and European countries in probation and parole systems. That will take place on Sunday, June 30th at 11 a.m. The International Relations Committee is also sponsoring another workshop. This workshop is entitled, How Can Family and Friends Improve Probation and Parole Outcomes? Lessons from the SSS, Social Supports in Supervision. That will take place Saturday between 3:45 p.m. and 5:15 p.m. I encourage you, if you are attending the American Probation and Parole Association in Indianapolis, to come track me down, say hello, and or come to one of the IRC-sponsored workshops. We really think you will enjoy that global perspective. And now, on to today's guest. I am honored to introduce our esteemed guest, Thomas Wuthrich. Thomas is a prominent figure in the realm of prison education and criminal justice reform. Thomas currently serves as the chair of the European Prison Education Association and has been instrumental in organizing and coordinating activities for practitioners involved in education in prisons across Europe. In addition to his role with the EPEA, Thomas has also served as the president of the Swiss Prison Association, and as you are about to learn, throughout his career, Thomas has demonstrated a commitment to promoting prison education and supporting penal reforms that place a greater emphasis on education within the penal system. He has collaborated with numerous international and national organizations to bring about meaningful reforms in the social and criminal justice sectors. Without further ado, let's dive into our conversation with Thomas Wuthrich and explore the transformative power of education within the prison system. So please enjoy my conversation with Thomas Wuthrich, and I will see you all on the other side. Welcome to the Criminologist podcast, Thomas. Why don't we begin by you briefly introducing yourself to the audience and essentially letting us know how your journey into prison education began. Just like I said, share with us how that journey began into the field of prison education and what really inspired you to focus on this area.
Okay, so I had very different jobs in my professional career. I'm based in Switzerland. I did here my Master of Arts in History and Social Anthropology. And later I had also an Executive Master in Nonprofit Management. And so my basic studies in history and social anthropology are not very demanded studies on the labor market. So I started as a night watch in a refugee's house. Then I had some classes in a college. Then I was for many years executive secretary of a political party in Zurich. Then director of a housing cooperative. But 25 years ago, I became a director of an NGO offering housing for released persons, a halfway house, and even working places in a recycling workshop where people could comply with their community sanctions. So it's 20 years now that I entered the world of prisons and or penitentiaries. And 13 years ago, I was looking for a new challenge, and I saw this job ad about education in prison. And I thought, okay, that could combine all my talents and educations. So I applied, and in the end, I got a job as regional director for education in prison in Eastern Switzerland. And I started then, so I was responsible for several prisons. I started with 2 in this region, and after 6 years, there were 10 prisons engaged in education in prison. So that was quite a booming sector then, because it was new introduced in 2007. And before, there was nothing to compare with. There was always vocational training in prisons, but not, let's say, basic education, meaning people who didn't have or forgot their education up to the 9th grade. So that's the mandatory education everyone in Switzerland should have. So that's addressed to those people who don't have anymore this knowledge. And about motivation to be there, okay, I said it could be I could combine all my talents and educations there. But in the end, it turned out that education in prison is something really special, and I loved to work there. I loved to work with the teachers. I love to work also with the prison staff and governors. So because prisons in general reflect the outside world in a condensed way. And so everything was happening outside, or every issue that's outside, that's in a condensed form, you find it also in prison. And that's really fascinating. And I also loved our students. So I had to go to visit the teachers' lessons in the classroom. So I met many different persons there. And I loved always to be with them. They are basically, for me, these are good people. they not basically they don't exactly, or they know very well what's good, what's wrong. So there are people like you and me, basically. There are few who are not, but these are really few.
Thomas, as you were speaking and introducing yourselves, you mentioned you finally found a role that you could really leverage all of your combined talents, as you put it. And to that end, when you were listing your educational background, you mentioned formal training in history and anthropology. I always marvel at how this field, corrections, probation, parole, brings such a diverse background of individuals. And we really are examining what the value of who we bring into this field and what that's all about. I know, for example, here in America, we're sort of going through a reckoning around this notion that, at least in the community corrections space, that probation and parole officers wear two hats. Say, on Monday, you're wearing more of that law enforcement hat, and on Tuesday, you're wearing more of that social worker hat. And I think we really need to redefine that. And again, bring in, like you said, history, anthropology, criminology, psychology. It's a lot more than the traditional, quote unquote, criminal justice training, which a lot of people came into this field thinking that's what it's all about.
I can say even I remember when we had job interviews at one smaller prison in Switzerland, the director said to me, maybe I should ask the teacher to train the staff how to build up relations and maintain them healthy. So that's exactly what I think, that's one point that's really needed in prison. Relations of trust, of confidence, also of authenticity, so that because these people need a training field, and they can train their social skills only with true people, with authentic people, and with people they can trust in. So for me, it's obvious that, especially from my field, from the pedagogy, it's really healthy to humanize prisons.
So much so. And you mentioned your work in Switzerland, Thomas. Regular listeners of the Criminologist podcast will know that we look around the world for what works, what's working in corrections. So, of course, we've studied quite extensively the work they're doing in Norway, and more broadly, just sort of this notion of dynamic security versus static security. And You just hit the nail on the head, Thomas, when you said it really is all about simply having these relationships. And if we can't acknowledge that without that fundamental relationship, none of our other core correctional skills will take traction. As you said, when you half jokingly said, maybe the school teachers should be training the corrections officers on relationship building. That really is what it's all about. And we really need to focus more on that. So maybe tell us about, to that end, you've spoken about the Swiss penitentiary system at various international forums. What do you believe, Thomas, are the key strengths and unique aspects of the Swiss approach to prison education that maybe some of our other global partners could learn from?
Yeah. So maybe I start with the unique factors in the penitentiary system of Switzerland, because we have a federal law on penal law, but the execution of the sentences is a task for every canton. And as we have 26 cantons, we have 26 ministries of justice to deal with.
Let me jump in here, Thomas, for the listener. You said 26 cantons. Are we saying 26 counties or 26?
No, like state, yeah, like in the US, yeah.
Okay, yes, then please proceed, because we have that issue in the United States as well. We have 50 states. That means we have 50 corrections agencies, at least, because within those states, there's multiple agencies. So proceed with the 26 cantons in Switzerland, Thomas.
The thing is that we are only 8.5 million, and you are much more within 50 states. So you could imagine that the smaller cantons, I think the smallest canton has about 40,000 or 50,000 inhabitants. inhabitants. So that's really small jurisdictions.
Yes.
But nevertheless, so that's something unique. You have to convince 26 ministers of justice, and then within these jurisdictions also the every prison governor. So that's quite a lot of work to do, convincing them that they have to introduce now education in prison. Something special or something unique is also the high percentage of foreign detainees in Switzerland. We have a rate of about around 70% of detainees who don't have a Swiss passport. That's second most in the countries of the Council of Europe. Only Luxembourg has a bit more, and after us too, there is Austria with around 50%. So there is a big gap between Luxembourg, Switzerland, and the next countries. So that makes it quite, let's say, different, or also we need a unique approach to all these detainees. I have the figures of 2022, when we had students from 104 countries, and and half of them had maximum an education of 9 school years. So we do statistics, and around 15% were in primary school, so the first 6 years. It doesn't mean that they really came up to the 6th grade, but at least they had some classes in primary school. Then a third of the prison population has maximum another 3 years of school. So what do you do with these people who sometimes hardly know how to read or write? And we developed our own curriculum, targeted especially at the most vulnerable inmates. So that means our first goal in our curriculum is to empower everyone that he or she could manage his daily life in prison. And that means that they have to learn German in German-speaking part, or French in the French-speaking part. So we developed, let's say, a crash course in German in prison, so that people could become autonomous, and also would support their self-confidence, their self-esteem, because then with this nice education tool, they saw, or they felt that they really can learn. It's difficult to learn, but they could even learn some German. And so I think that's very, very important, that you always target at the most vulnerable, because it's the same as outside. We think of money and education, higher education, but there are 10%, even in Switzerland, who are at or below the survival limit. So we have to care for them. The others already know more or less, but we have to care for the most vulnerable.
Can I interrupt you real quick, Thomas?
Please.
I have been taking copious notes throughout this interview, and you said something just now. You used that word empower as far as your approach to educating, for example, the inmates in your facilities who are uniquely international or semi-uniquely international, something we don't deal with here in the United States, for example. But I just love that language. We're going to empower folks with the goal of building their self-esteem, or you could almost say their self-efficacy, their agency. That's exactly slightly and uniquely different than, for example, in the States here, where it's just, well, we want to educate you to, I mean, I'm not trying to be too cynical, but almost simply, let's just check that box. Let's just check that box that says you now have a high school diploma, or you participated in this generic curricula versus, like you said, let's just target, how can we empower these folks? I know even a handful of words in German would create a sense of safety, you would argue, or self-empowerment.
Exactly.
That alone versus arithmetic tables or those more traditional education approaches. I just wanted to pause and say, I really appreciate that you're looking at the ends to the means here, not just checking a box.
Let me tell you one story that to illustrate this a bit. I was once visiting a class of a very experienced female teacher, and she had a man from Northern Africa in her class, and this was illiterate, completely illiterate person. And they achieved together that he learned to read and write in German. And I remember when I was there, he had this evaluation form in front of him, and he, with his pencil, he was writing down very slowly, I can read, I can write, but you should have seen his face. He was smiling all over because he felt so proud that he achieved this. And then I realized, hey, if you had not the chance to get an education, appropriate education, then you are excluded of the whole world. So if you want include people, if you want to make them participate, or if you do want them to have active citizens, so then you have to educate them, and that starts not only with with knowledge of writing and reading, but also all the social skills, social behavior, building up relations, anger control, whatever, and that you can all learn in school because you are in a group and you are working together, and there is no laughing when someone tells something wrong. There is a lot of respect. In education, we create a safe space. So everything is possible. And together we want to achieve the best for every one of these students. So I think that's so important because I think, or my belief is that one of the factors that they committed a crime was, apart from all the economic things and relational things, also a lack of self-confidence, self-esteem. So if you have people who appreciate themselves, then the world would look different.
Thomas, earlier in the interview, you mentioned the Council of Europe. I am also familiar with, for example, the Confederation of European Probation. I see the value in these international organizations with common goals. You are the current chair of the European Prison Education Association, EPEA.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What are the primary goals of that organization, and how do you go about achieving those goals? Tell us a little bit about EPEA.
Yes, that's a bit, actually, it's a bit a difficult story. So EPA was funded, let's say, almost, now it's 30 years ago, and it grew quite well. There was a strong network of practitioners, researchers, and also responsible people in education in prison. But it turned out in the last decade that it became more and more difficult to run an organization at European level, only volunteering. We are not paid. We volunteer completely. So we get our travel expenses if we have reimbursed, but we have no salary, not any reimbursement at all, just for the work we do. So and Corona was then really a very difficult situation, or made the situation even more difficult. So we are now restarting. The last 2 years, we really tried to restart the whole organization. And what we want to be, and we are doing step by step towards these goals, is to be a platform for professional exchange between practitioners and researchers. So we had, after 4 years, we had last year our conference in Norway, where 120 participants from 22 countries were participating, and they all said, "Oh, that's so important to have this platform, because we don't know from each other what we are doing." And that's maybe a general problem of all the educators, teachers in prison. They're Some are on their own, or some are in a school just in one prison, and they don't have any contact to other prison schools or to other teachers. So they really appreciate if they have a professional exchange. And we are still looking for what we can do better for all our members. We have many ideas what it could be. It could be also a platform where you could find partners for projects. For example, in Europe there is this Erasmus Plus funding program where you can apply for financing a project. So there are many projects running, but one point is that after 3 years, all the results disappear because the website of these projects isn't maintained anymore. So EPEA could become like a library of all these projects which are done in education in prison or in the penitentiary world. That could be there could be a profit for all our members if there would be like an archive to search, was there already done something similar or whatever.
You mentioned the value, Thomas, simply of good professional communication and almost sort of a knowledge exchange and the value added of that. I know to that end, you've been involved in some job shadowing projects with countries like Belgium, Spain, Greece, Austria. I've been blessed to have done some work in Europe. And again, I see the value of just meeting our international counterparts and almost having a community of practice. Share some of the key learnings and best practices from the experiences you've had with those professionals in those other nations.
So maybe the key point is, wherever you go, you can learn something.
It's so true.
So also, I'm quite happy, or I'm quite satisfied with what's happening in Switzerland in education in prison. We are on the right track, but nevertheless, I could see good ideas implemented in the whole education in prison. So everywhere where I went, not only in these job shadowings, but also in other parts, I always saw something. Oh, that's a nice idea. Why don't we have it? So you come back with many inspirations and ideas. So these job shadowings I did as I was still employed by the Swiss Center of Expertise in Prison and Probations. And I must admit that I had to convince my bosses always, the several I had, hey, it's so important that we have an international point of view and that we have an exchange. So I introduced it, and I was the only one who did it. I saw, for example, I think there are many examples I could tell. But for example, to start with Belgium, what I learned there, they had 3 months vocational training vocational training lasting 3 months, and at the end they got a certificate which was acknowledged by the different professional associations. So that was construction work or electrician or whatever. And so they knew the employer as the employee, or the released person knew what they could ask for, and that they could do it well. And so they already had a starting point into one profession and getting better there on the job. So that I think is a very good thing to do, because in Switzerland, vocational training is very strict in the sense that it has to last 3 years with curriculum and blah, blah, blah. So it takes a lot of time. And there's no opportunity to make it somewhat shorter or whatever. I saw this also in Austria. They divided their vocational training in 5 modules. And you could start in prison to learn in the first module, get a certificate at the end after an exam, obviously. And then you could start the second one and maybe even the third one. And then released, you could find a job with these qualifications and do the 4th module and the 5th module. And then you had an overall vocational training like everyone else did in Austria. So that's a nice thing to do. And I think that's also a very important thing I learned in education in prison. Present or offer the students small bits, because they have not the perseverance to follow or to see a goal which is far, far away. So they need really in short time, they need a feeling of success. So they got a certificate, they got whatever. And then they can see, I progress, I'm developing well. And so it's important to divide all the stuff in small portions. And then you have these vulnerable people on board.
You mentioned getting the inspiration from other practitioners, really getting that point of view. As I mentioned, I've been blessed to have done some international work, and I've toured correctional facilities in Scotland and in Barcelona. And in Barcelona in particular, I was exposed to what you're describing there, Thomas. A lot of expatriates in custody in Barcelona, which in the United States, we simply don't see that. That's not a phenomenon at all. But my question is, yes, you've shared some of those inspirations from getting sort of a survey of other international prisons. What are some of the challenges that you've seen faced when you've been promoting and attempting to implement prison education programs? What are some of the challenges or barriers you've come across?
We had just a meeting of the steering committee of the EPEA. That's we have one physical meeting every year. So we discussed one point that is very important, because it's not everywhere in Europe the same. Some teachers in prison are employed by the Ministry of Education, and some of them by the Ministry of Justice, and some even by an NGO. Like in Switzerland, it's a separate body that is running the whole educational service in prison. So who do we address really? Which policymaker or decision maker we really address? From our point of view, it should be the Ministry of Education. But I learned in some occasions, you go to the Ministry of Education and they hardly know that they have teachers teaching in prison. So they have no lobby. So maybe it's better to address the ministries of justice, or at least the prison administration, and then say, hey, Council of Europe has its recommendation on this topic. In every prison, there must be an offer of educational service. And the education is equal to work. And then again, for example, in Switzerland, we managed that in these basic education classes, they can come to the classroom a half day a week. But if the recommendation says work is equal to education, it should be even more education than just one half a day. So, but that would turn up the whole system, because to a certain point, prisons rely also on their income, on the income generated in the workshops. So if you say, okay, half of the week is education, half of the week is work, so there would be lots of income for the prisons, or even more expenses, because as I learned, it's in all countries I was talking about this topic. In every country, going to school is remunerated. So they got €1 or whatever. And in Switzerland, they get the same as if they would go to work. Just not to make people think, oh, I don't want to go to school because I cannot earn anything. So, yes. So that should be the incentive, that they first even think of it, go to school, and there are no other obstacles for them. So that's really that's a difficulty. Who should we address? And you see in the countries where teachers are employed by the Ministry of Education, they have a really strong position, because it's the law which says, hey, school for everyone. And there is you cannot avoid it in prison. Prison is part of our world, so you have to offer classes if you want or not. So you have to offer the premises, and you have to give access for the teacher and whatever. So they can really rely on the law. And if you go to the ministries of justice, they say, that's a security problem. We don't have the premises. That's a lot of organizational difficulties, whatever. So they're not aware of this. I'm talking generally, no. So I won't blame any personally, but. To say it in general, so they don't really aware what education could bring to them in prison life, in daily prison life. There's still a lot of convincing needed that this education in prison is a key factor in the reinsertion process. I even become more and more convinced that in the center of all should be education, and then all the other services around, and also the security aspect is just one aspect of all those surrounding education in the center.
Well, and speaking of convincing those policy makers, those decision makers, I myself am a big believer in leveraging empirical data. I think we really need to rely on the research. Yeah. But as an evidence-based practice champion, I will also tell you in the same breath that data is amazing. We should rely on data, but getting back to convincing those policymakers, our stakeholders, the public, there's really nothing like the value of a great story, Thomas. Can you just sort of draw from your experience, and can you think of the impact that education has had on an individual? Can you share a success story to sort of, again, that we can couple with that empirical data, but just to really give a human touch to folks about the value, you said, of making education centric to our whole approach here?
that's a bit a difficult thing to comply with, because when people are getting out of prison, they don't want to have anything to do anymore with the prison world. So you hardly hear of these stories. But there once was a story in a Swiss newspaper. I think it was a man from Croatia, and he was working. So he had not a formal education in prison, but what we call informal education, meaning he worked in a plant nursery, and he worked there for 7 years, and he learned so much that when he was sent back, he opened his own plant nursery business, and he had success with this, and could survive. So that's for sure one example that shows that if you have a clear perspective to the end of serving the sentence, so what could they do, what opportunities they should have being released. If you really center on these questions, you do quite a lot. Maybe another small example. It was also a man from Croatia. It was in one of our classrooms, and so he was he was he tried hard to learn German. And then I appeared there, and he asked me, why should I learn German? And then I asked him, from where are you? Yeah, Croatia. You know that Croatia is one of the major holiday spots for Germans. So if you, as a mechanic, know some words in German and can explain the fixing the car in German, then you would be the hero. I didn't think of it. Yeah. So I think it could be small things. And even this last example shows they are not really, because they lack education, they're not as they have not the possibility or the ability to think in a very creative way. So you even have to open up the doors for them, and make them thinking, hey, your talents are this and this and this, and if you add this, then you could do that and that. So it really needs counseling. It's not only learning math or languages, but they need counseling. And some of this work can be done by the social services in prison, but some part can also be done in education in prison.
This is a great example, Thomas, of how we sort of connect the dots on these various fields coming together. Just now, as you were speaking and you were talking about the individual that just lacked that inability to see the benefits of the long-term benefits of investing in his probation. Yeah. I was speaking with some practitioners the other day, and I started to go down that neuroscience pathway. And I was pointing out to these practitioners, I said, with high-risk individuals who are justice impacted, one of the things we know is, to your point, Thomas, yes, they lack the inability to connect their short-term behaviors with long-term consequences, not just around the crimes they're committing and not connecting future consequences, but to your point, they're lacking the ability to connect. Oh, if I make this investment in my education, I can see the long-term. They're living more in that lane of immediate gratification and that kind of thing. But again, it's just more of another example of how, when we holistically view this issue from various perspectives, we can all see everybody in agreement. I was smiling earlier, Thomas, to myself when you began this reply by saying, well, it's always a lot more difficult to look for the successes. And that's a great point. I mean, nobody leaves their correctional facility and knocks on the door 3 years later to tell the governor or the warden, hey, I'm living a quiet life in the village down the street working as a mechanic. We only hear the failures when they're splashed across the headlines because of a high profile reoffense. So it's it's somewhat of a public relations battle. Nobody comes back to the hospital after they were treated and cured, they only come back when it didn't take, or when there's a failure. Yeah, so it's a bit of a public relations conundrum.
That's why I say often, if I have the opportunity to talk to a director or to a responsible high rank person of in prison administration, I ask them always, hey, why don't you tell you about the good things you do? I know that you do good things, so tell the stories of success, because people stay in the society has an image of prisons of the 19th century still, and that's horrible. It cannot be. So tell them how it is and what good things you do. It would also help the prison staff, because I learned also that or some colleagues from the staff told me, hey, in my family, it was not very well seen when I said I go to work in prison. But if it's seen as part of a social work project, then, or the educational project, and they play their role within this whole project, then they would also have a better image as professionals, and maybe also they would be a bit prouder of their contribution to the whole process of reinsertion.
Yeah, exactly. Do some repackaging that those of us in corrections, this is a noble profession, this is a helping profession, and again, view the field a little bit differently. Thomas, I was speaking recently with another guest, Pia Puolakka, who is down the road from you a bit in Finland, but she does a lot of work with artificial intelligence and
I know her. Yeah.
Yep, and so-called smart prisons. Pia's amazing.
Yeah.
How do you see the future of prison education? How do you envision the future of prison education in Europe, and I guess what steps are necessary to advance that field further?
Okay, to say it a bit bluntly, I think everyone in prison should have access to internet and even maybe a mobile phone.
Yeah.
So that would be the first part of the vision. But at least in classrooms or in secured rooms, they should have access to the internet, because just applying for a job nowadays, you just send an email with all your documents as PDF files. So there's no talking, no letters writing. So it is really needed, and it should also be that they have, from the point of education, they should have access from their cell to educational stuff. So they could do also homeworks in their cells as anyone else who is going through an educational setting. So they need to be connected to a secured platform, or they should have access to educational offers. And there are some program or some platforms. I know a bit better in the German-speaking world. So there is this electronic learning in penitentiary system. That's a platform that is run now for 15 years, something like this, and most of the German Bundesländer are attached to, and also whole Austria. So they use it, and that's, for me, that's this platform covers everything from learning German up to university studies, because they have direct access to a university in Germany. So you could do distance learning with this university, and I think that has to be the standard. Just this. And then opportunities. I saw this. It was from Finland. I think it was from Pia, the movie. Especially in closed regime prisons, you can with the virtual reality, and also you can train people on certain professions. Or you can make them walk through a wood, whatever. So for having something for their soul, but also you can learn things in a virtual reality as a mechanic or even the carpenter. Just know how it feels, or how do you have to handle the tool, whatever. So that's incredible what could be done, but. And there is a great but from my point of view. I think that would the investment starting such or implementing such trainings would be very high. So when I was at the conference in Georgia last year, Tbilisi. So the topic of the conference was digitalization, and I was the only one who said, "Hey, you don't save any money just bringing in or digitalizing the whole prison, because you need people." From the point of view from education, it doesn't replaces any teacher. It doesn't replaces any social worker. It doesn't replaces any psychologist. So all the important people, it's okay when they have their digital tools, but you need them, the professionals, anyway. So, and the general tenor was, oh, yes, we have a safe prison, and then we may need less staff. Hey, that doesn't turn out well, because that's like coming back to the beginning of our talk. What these people need who are incarcerated is relationships, and not a touch screen that doesn't help anything. I remember just a short example. When we visited in 2015, it was on the job shadowing. We visited the then new prison in Beveren. And we had just a chance to talk with the detainees too, and one of them said, "Hey, when the server fails, I have nothing left in my cell, not even television." So, hey, they're absolutely lost. And I was there with a teacher of mine, and he said, is it really a helpful development if the detainee can make an appointment with the doctor on his touch screen instead of going to the medical unit, ask the nurse and the doctor, could I have an appointment, please?
I'm chuckling and laughing to myself, Thomas, because as you're speaking, in my mind, I went from originally thinking, well, you're describing what the Norwegians would describe as that principle of normalcy. In other words, giving the individuals access to the internet or to a smartphone, something, by the way, which 10 years ago would have been sacrilegious to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to give residents of a correctional facility that kind of access. Yeah. But then I went from thinking, well, yes, we're embracing that principle of normalcy to, okay, have we taken this too far? Because when you told this story about the server going down and the inmate saying, well, I can't do anything, because it reminded me of, Thomas, for example, when here in my home, when we have a thunderstorm and the electricity goes out and I lose internet access, satellite TV access, and I say to my wife, well, I can't do anything. So I guess in an ironic way, Thomas, we have imparted that principle of normalcy, because now the prisoner is thinking, well, yes, the server went down. I can't do anything. My life is over because I can't stare at my touch tablet or my screen. I have to talk to human beings again.
But at least you can go outside or whatever, or walking around in your home. But, these people are lost in 10 square meters or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's the point. I remember Corona times when restrictions were everywhere. People who lived in a nice in a nice house with some garden around it, no problem. But people who lived in little apartments and 100 apartments in this building, hey, that was a mess.
That's a horse of a different color. Yeah. Thomas, just maybe wrap this up by reflect on your extensive career, which has been very rewarding. Maybe talk about some of the more rewarding aspects of your work in prison, and just really what keeps you going, what keeps you motivated to do the great work that you're doing, Thomas.
I got really fond of the topic, and I become more and more convinced that education in prison is a key factor, or the key factor, and that's why I'm really enthusiastic about going on in this with this topic, and to contribute my part to disseminate this message. And I met so many great people, from governors to prison staff and teachers. In general, they are doing a very good job, a very demanding job, and not a very appreciated job by society. That's another reason why I really stand for it, because people have to know, hey, that's not easy to be there as an incarcerated person, nor as an employee. So please help them as much as you can, and contribute to their work as much as you can, because everyone who was in prison is coming out, or who is in prison will come out and could be our neighbor. So what kind of people do we want to be released?
Exactly.
So that's actually the slogan of our Minister of Justice in the canton of Zurich. They started to tell it like this two years ago. These people will be our neighbors. So okay. In general, fascinating people, and as I mentioned at the beginning, prison is a mirror of what's going on outside. So you get aware of all these nowadays keywords: inclusion and education and whatever. So all the keywords there, and if you think it consequently, then you would have to remake the whole penitentiary system, because as it is generally speaking, as it is nowadays, it doesn't really help to achieve all these goals of inclusion, active citizenship, well-educated people, whatever. It doesn't really help. So there are still too many obstacles who are not helping to go there. So yes, and that's why I've been in so many volunteer initiatives all my life. It's just that's me. But at the end, that I like to be active, and that I contribute to my part for society, or for a change in society, or a little change in society. So it's not me, but I like it. I like to do it, and that's why I also run for a chair of the EPEA, because I now, as a retired, I have still time, I have the connections, and I have the knowledge, or of all of a bit of all of them. So that's why not me being a chair of the EPEA.
Thomas, where you are what I would refer to in the United States as a true believer, and we need true believers out there. I really appreciate you, Thomas. Thomas Wuthrich, joining us all the way from his home in Switzerland. Yeah. Thomas, I look forward to having you back on the show. I can pair you up with another subject matter expert, and I look forward to some future updates, my friend.
Yeah, sure. I would appreciate it. Thank you very much again for inviting me to your show.
All right. We'll talk soon, Thomas.
Okay. See you. Good. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye. I wish to extend my deepest gratitude to Thomas Wuthrich for sharing his invaluable insights with us today. His work in promoting prison education and advocating for penal reforms is truly inspiring. It is clear that education plays a crucial role in the rehabilitation and reintegration of incarcerated individuals, and leaders like Thomas are at the forefront of these changes. Reflecting on today's discussion, I am reminded of the critical importance of understanding and addressing the root causes of criminal behavior. By incorporating trauma-informed care and desistance principles into our practice, we can create a more effective and compassionate criminal justice system, which is what we aim to achieve with our innovative TIDES supervision model. Please visit our website, thetidesllc.com, for more information. As we look ahead, I'm excited to see many of you at the upcoming American Probation and Parole Association Training Institute at the end of June 2024, taking place in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's another fantastic opportunity to exchange ideas and learn from each other. As I said, the International Relations Committee will be sponsoring 2 workshops. I encourage you to check those out, and I hope to see some of you there. Hey, if you've got questions or comments about today's episode, please feel free to reach out and ask us any and all questions at thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. New fun images are being added all the time to those feeds. You don't want to miss out. You may also connect with me, Joseph Arvidsson, or Thomas Wuthrich on LinkedIn, and follow both the Criminologist Podcast and the Paragon Group on our LinkedIn pages. Before we wrap up today's episode, I want to take a moment to tell you about an incredible resource that is transforming the world of corrections and rehabilitation, the Rehab app. The Rehab app, which was developed by my dear friend, Professor Iwan Dernescu from the University of Bucharest, is a global platform where rehabilitation science comes to life through an immersive digital experience. Dive into a world where learning is not only informative, but also interactive and engaging, with contributions from esteemed experts like Dr. James Banta and Dr. Shad Maruna. You'll have access to cutting-edge content right at your fingertips. Now, whether you're a practitioner, educator, or simply someone passionate about rehabilitation, Rehab is your go-to resource for the latest insights and developments in the field. Don't miss out on this opportunity to elevate your knowledge and practice. Download the Rehab app today and join the future of rehabilitation. We'll be back next time with a fresh episode. In the meantime, you may contact the show or reach out to us through our various websites. You can find us at theparagongroup.llc.com. We are also at thetidesllc.com if you want to find out more information on that innovative supervision model. Hey, lastly, if you've not already done so, check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Criminologist, for additional content as to the themes of this podcast. And if you believe in what we're doing on the podcast, if you want to be part of the movement, please spread the word, tell a friend or a coworker or a colleague about us. Ask them to subscribe to the podcast. And of course, do so yourself if you've not already done so. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us.
But nevertheless, I could see good ideas implemented in the whole education in prison. So everywhere where I went, not only in these job shadowings, but also in other parts, I always saw something. Oh, that's a nice idea. Why don't we have it? So you come back with many inspirations and ideas.
This has been a special APPA edition of the Criminologist podcast. Their international relations team looks forward to sharing the insights of other subject matter experts from around the world in future episodes. The Criminologist podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, or training opportunities, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.